everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life. This is my cat's tail, and I am coming to you from my backyard to talk to you today about Deer Man by Geoffroy Delorme. This is 7 years of living in the wild, and it is originally written in French, and it was translated to English by Shaun Whiteside. This is a book that was sent to me by Greystone books. They kindly reached out to Doris and I as the organizers of the Book Naturalist Book Club and asked if we would like to receive a copy of this book to read and review. So I was very interested in this book. I am always interested in the idea of somebody living out in the wild, living in nature, sort of the adventure side of that story, and also the idea of living with deer. This particular cover and the title obviously makes you think, okay, he went out in the wild and he lived with a herd of deer. And that is, in fact, what Geoffroy Delorme did. So Geoffroy Delorme tells a story of his own experience, basically abandoning his human-based life and going off to live in the forest. Geoffroy was a child who did not do well in regular school, so his family removed him from that environment and homeschooled him, so therefore he was very isolated. He was brought up in by himself, basically studying alone at home, and he was very lonely and very isolated, and so he felt very much at home in the wild. He started out by just taking excursions into his garden and getting to know the animals that lived in his garden, and then he would adventure further and further afield. And when he did that, he found joy in being in nature and communing with animals and the life around him in nature, whether that be trees or fields or meadows or the actual animals. And so after he completed his schooling, rather than sort of jump right into the grown-up lifestyle, he really just couldn't imagine doing that. So he decided to take some time and go and try to live on his own, to survive on his own in the wild, in the forest. And so he does that, and he ends up spending 7 years in this forest land near where he grew up. And so this book really details his what it took to survive, the things that he did in order to survive, how he ate, how he found shelter, how he kept himself warm and dry. And it also details his experience actually forming relationships with a group of deer that lived in a forest nearby where he was from. And these are roe deer. They're different than the white-tailed deer, which I know of here in Maine in the United States. This is a different species, but similar in that they are herbivores. They live not in herds. I shouldn't say that. They don't live in herds. They live in an area together, and they do group up in the wintertime, but in the summertime, in the breeding season, they divide up and have their own territories, which they do defend and mark and keep for their own territory. So Geoffroy Delorme really becomes part of this group of deer in this forest. He forms very close relationships with one or two of the deer in particular, who seem to accept him as one of their own. He is able to, touch them and be near them and follow them around. They eat similar things. And it's really a really remarkable relationship. He also witnesses terrible things, injury to some of the animals. He witnesses one of the animals get killed in a hunting situation, which was very, very sad, brought me to tears. And so he details the good and the bad of this experience that he has. And at the end of the 7 years, he realizes that his health has been impacted. He is beginning to be very weak not so much because it is impossible to live on your own in the wild, but more because the area in which is available to him to live wild has become smaller and smaller as human encroachment has happened in this part of the world, as industrial forestry is occurring, industrial forest management is occurring, and that is just not conducive with maintaining the size of the habitat that both deer need and unbeknownst to Geoffroy, that humans need in order to survive. So he decides to come back to the human world and tell people what his experience was like and explain what the deer are like, because in the 7 years that he has been living with these creatures, he's really observed their habits and their nature and what it takes for them to survive in the wild as well. And it was really remarkable, the natural history of these roe deer that he interacts with, and the mannerisms in which they interact with each other and with their environment was really, truly remarkable, and also very educational and informative. We tend to look at wildlife through the lens of what we know as humans, when there are many ways of knowing things in the world. And these deer know things that we don't know, about vegetation, about their habitat, about how to be safe. And Delorme really learns from their behavior and learns from their example. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time spent with this book. I've said a couple of times on other videos that my husband picked this book up before I could even pick it up and start reading it, and he has been reading it as well. So both the members of our household have been enjoying this book. I am really thankful that I had an opportunity to read it. So thanks again to Greystone Books. And thank you to Geoffroy Delorme for writing such an interesting account of his experience living in the wild, and his really fascinating account of what it's like to be a roe deer. I really had a great time reading this book. I hope you will check it out. It is available now from September 27th on. You can purchase this at your bookstore of choice, and I hope you will give it a shot, because I think it's an excellent book, and because we need to support nature and science books in translation, because there just aren't enough nature and science books in translation, in my opinion. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.